So as people are coming on, let me just formally welcome you all to our Santa Barbara Leadership Team weekly conversation about what really started out as to what we're going to do for the future of Santa Barbara and State Street. And then in the midst of it became the COVID-19 crisis and how it started to shut down parts of the street and what's going to happen next. So every Wednesday, we invite people who are active participants, and that can be city council members, architects, property owners. Jason Harris, who's the new city's new economic development director, has been on a couple times. But people just sharing ideas and conversations around what the future of Santa Barbara can be. But then with the post-crisis environment, there's obviously been a lot of concern and interest in how is this affecting business today, what's going to happen with business over the next few months or even over the next year, and frankly, what does all this mean for the future of Santa Barbara? And as you see in the picture behind me, there's been a lot of interest in what's happened to creating the promenade of State Street. And how is it possible that we might now take advantage of these kinds of things and make them more permanent? So there's lots of things we could talk about. But in particular, you were all invited into this conversation because you're either an architect or you're people who work with architects every day. And I know that in Ellen's case and Cass's case, and we might start with the introductions of you, you're also the co-chairs of this advisory, I'm not sure whether you call it a task force or committee or just the people putting on the AIA, American Institute of Architects, Charette, but there's a substantive group of people looking at how to plan out the future of State Street. So why don't I invite you, Ellen, to start with, and then Cass, just to quickly introduce yourself with a couple sentences and tell us what your role is.
Do you want me to start?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah, my name is Cass ENSBERG, and actually there are three of us who are co-chairs, three architects that are co-chairs for the Charette, Ellen, BILDSTEN, DETTY, PEIKERT, and myself. So all three of us are trying to keep everybody on course and organizing this. I'm a resident of Santa Barbara for over 30 years, and I'm a local architect and an artist, and again, co-chair with my colleagues and friends. And we advocate for improvements in our planning and development processes and ordinances, and are currently really working hard on this design charrette that you just mentioned. And thank you so much for having us here. We're just delighted to be here with you and really appreciate all the work of your group and are delighted to have an opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Let's move on to our second co-host.
Hello, Ellen BILDSTEN, architect in Santa Barbara for the last 20 years. I have an architecture firm, BILDSTEN Architecture and Planning on Figueroa Street. We are, the three of us, as Cass mentioned, are very active with the AIA Advocacy group. We head that up, and one of our big initiatives this year was organizing a charrette, which we look forward to telling you more about. Our organization has a bit of a history identifying important issues for our community and then rallying the troops of the architects and engineers and other designers in town to help envision for the city things that are meaningful in terms of how policy making moves forward. So we look forward to telling you more about that this afternoon.
Great. And Diddy, you're not only one of the co-chairs, but you've been involved in a lot of the activities about the future of downtown Santa Barbara. So why don't you also tell us how, if people are watching and they want to get involved, how can they get involved?
Yeah, I will say a couple of words about myself first. I've been practicing architecture here in Santa Barbara for about 38 years. I'm a principal with RRM Design Group. As Ellen Cass mentioned, we've been working very closely together on these advocacy issues that we believe really are necessary to just enhance our community. But the most intensive program that we've been working on the last couple of months is organizing this design charrette that is going to focus on our central business district, and particularly the State Street corridor. And I just want to say a couple of things about it. We're just in a really interesting situation. We organized a charrette in 2017 that focused on State Street as well, very similar. And it was really quite an amazing process, but there were a lot of other things going on in the community at the time, including some of the disasters that we've experienced. The results of the charrette didn't sort of penetrate, shall we say, the community to the degree that we would have wished. But the central ambition of that charrette, which was to recommend a couple of key things, and that is that we focus housing in our downtown as a way to ensure the long-term sustainability of our central business district, especially in the face of the kinds of changes we're seeing in our business environment downtown. And the second thing, I'm kind of losing track of my thoughts here. The second thing was simply to involve the community in a process of revisioning Santa Barbara's downtown. And we're thinking in an interesting way, we're kind of thinking about a future that stretches 100 years out. You know, if you think one of the last major changes that we had in Santa Barbara was when we had the earthquake in 1925. And so we're looking as 2025 approaches to a situation that we're experiencing now, where we have these three interconnected crises that are really changing the way our downtown is functioning, the way our community is functioning. We have the COVID pandemic crisis, and then the economic crisis that is related to that. But even with that economic crisis, we've had an economic crisis in a sense that affects businesses, because as I mentioned, the way businesses are functioning now. And then we have a housing crisis that is statewide, and that is affecting every community in California, and particularly in Santa Barbara. We need the housing. We need housing to provide shelter and homes for people who work and live here. And we're not able to produce it sufficiently. And so this will be an opportunity to kind of take the confluence of these three interlocking crises to focus attention on a vision, a new vision for our downtown that starts to address some of these kinds of issues. So
that's great.
Time.
We're going to get into some questions for you when we get into this too. So go right ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to add one last thought to that. The incredible thing about this confluence of these forces, these crises effectively, has created tremendous community enthusiasm to work on this. We have volunteers who are signing up to participate in the charrette. I think we have like 190 people who have signed up so far. And then we put out a survey to ask the general public questions about State Street. And we had like, I think almost 5,000 responses now, and page upon page of ideas and recommendations. So there's just tremendous community enthusiasm for what we're doing. And with all these amazing design professionals kind of putting their attention on this over the next couple of months, I think we're going to see some amazing concepts, ideas, and visionary thinking that we can use in our community to address our future. So sorry, that's a lot of words.
That's great. Well, I want to make sure I introduce Henry, and Henry Lenny, obviously another architect, but also one of the extraordinary sort of points of memory of how the history of Santa Barbara has emerged and has been a part of redesigning, revamping landmarks in Santa Barbara, but also part of, goes back into the history that I had with the city in terms of how you re-envision for the future. And you know, I'm just reminded, Detty, as your comments that, you know, I've often said and heard others talk about other cities, including Pasadena and Santa Monica, where they say, you know, you go through these major revisioning processes to bring the community together, and then you create something new, but it has a shelf life of about 30 years. And then you have to do it all over again. And it strikes me, you know, this week is the 30th anniversary of our opening of Paseo Nuevo. It was August 17th, 1990. That's like Monday is the 30th anniversary of our opening of Paseo Nuevo.
Wow.
And we spent 6 years before Paseo Nuevo. This really was a project of the city. It wasn't a developer's project. It was a project of the city and invited developers to come in to do it, but it was to recreate and stabilize downtown.
Mm-hmm.
It was also to stabilize the tax base of the community, because we were losing about $140 million a year of leakage of tax dollars outside of the city of Santa Barbara. And it obviously was very successful, but 30 years have gone by, and now it's time to restock the shelf. It's time to re-envision what it is going to take to be the next 30 years.
Well,
So Henry,
interesting.
I just want to just let Henry just introduce himself for just a moment, and then I also, because Jason is on too. Jason is also an active participant because he is involved in a lot of adaptive reuse downtown, and it takes a lot of moving of the parts to make that happen. So Henry, just say a few words about yourself. Jason, say a few words about yourself, and then we'll get right back into the conversation.
All right. Well, I've been practicing about 37 years also. And I came to Santa Barbara when parking was still in existing on State Street. And I remember almost having weekly conversations with Hal, Dave Davis, about what we should do. And I recall that I had just come back from Paris, and I sat having coffee in the middle of the winter in the Champs-Élysées in France. And it was amazing, just seeing the wide sidewalks, people walking back and forth and so on and so forth. And I came back very excited, and I relayed that to Hal and Dave Davis. And I said, I wonder if it's possible to eliminate the parking on State Street. And I remember Dave Davis saying, they'll kill you. Believe me. Well, they didn't kill me, but they punctured the tires on my car that I had. So that was not very welcome. And now, of course, everybody's very protective of the sidewalks and so on. So anyway, since then, I've been confused about everything, which is a good thing, believe me. I would also mention that I was born and raised in a small city next to Guadalajara, Mexico, called Tlaquepaque, which is now an artisan colony. And I remember that across the street from my house, there was a tortilla shop. Next to that, a pharmacy. Next to that, an ice cream store. And it was all being driven by the residents and the mom and pop shops. Over the years, I was fortunate enough to do projects in San Miguel de Allende, in Mexico City, and so on. But that same formula still applied, where people lived where they worked, and the shops were not national chains. They were all mom and pop shops. And that's how it was when State Street still had the parking on State Street. And slowly over the years, we began to lose our small shops. And that was, in my opinion, the beginning of the end, because they were pushed out. And this is now an opportunity to go back to what we had before. And the thing that we should notice is that when people work next to or nearby where they work, the whole city opens up during the morning, during midday, and during the evening. People just walk out into the streets. They don't really need a car. they can work and they can have fun and they can go out to dinner literally blocks away from where they live. And it seems to me that all of you, myself included, are trying to go back to some semblance of what had been practiced in city and regional planning over the last 700 years in Europe, in Latin America, and other places. And that's the right thing to do. We lost it and we must bring it back. Especially for a city the size of Santa Barbara, which is not a small city, but it's not a large city either. We all know each other. We walk in the streets and we say hello to one another. And if you notice that when we all travel to different countries, the first place we go and the first place we ask is, where's the downtown? Because that is really where the magic is. And if you go to Venice, you'll find some shops that you would not find anywhere else in the world. And you buy things and you bring them back home and they become relics of your personal past. That probability still exists here. And I think we learned a lot over the last 30 years, actually, where some things work fine in the beginning and they do not work well now. And they don't work well because things became too big. The control of the retail was done in a corporate matter in some other city of Chicago, New York, and it all had to do with the stock market and it all had to do with profits and so on. And we're beginning to see that that experiment did fail. And so I'm not a fan of Amazon, but Amazon came as a default of the big stores and the lack of housing downtown. And unfortunately, if you go to Los Angeles, you know where you are, but you can also get lost because every other mile there is a strip shopping center that looks identical to the previous one and the previous one. So the cities have lost their identity, their history. And we haven't yet lost our history, our identity, our personality. We still own the icon that defines Santa Barbara from the very beginning, since the 1920s. And if you know that after the devastating earthquake of 1925, a group of the community architects, they form organizations like this to basically renew, revive, and reinvent Santa Barbara. And here we are again, and we're doing this. It's a great opportunity to do this. And like Hal says, this may last another 30 years, but it may get better. So it is an experiment, but it's a true and tried experiment that I think we can look back in Europe and other places of Latin America and so on. So anyway, that's, I'm excited to join and to do anything that I possibly can to make this happen.
Thank you, Henry. Let me just ask Jason just say a few words about himself, because none of this is going to happen without the property owners and those that have to actually do the design and reuse of these buildings. Jason, you are an expert at or becoming one very quickly in adaptive reuse, and you've just completed a building, which is a significant building downtown. So introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what that experience is like for you.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Hal, and thanks for the kind words of calling me an expert. I appreciate that. Jason Jaeger with Jaeger Partners. We are a Santa Barbara-based commercial real estate firm, primarily doing commercial management and brokerage. We manage about 500,000 square feet in Santa Barbara, and our ears to the ground with tenants and, you know, who's in the market, what they're looking for, what their experience is. And I also grew up in Santa Barbara. I went to Santa Barbara High School and married with 3 kids. So I'm very vested here and want to see Santa Barbara go in the right direction. some of the recent projects I've been involved with, a lot of with good partners I have, was the El Centro building. I think Tom Foley's on the call. He's one of the main guys there. And that was a 20,000 square foot office building that just needed to be completely rehabbed and brought back to its original life. So that was quite a process that's actually still going on. It's been over 3 years, believe it or not. So I'm sure a lot of people have gone through it and are excited to see the end result. Another project that we're in the process of is the 524 State Street, which is the Church of Scientology, which will be a 46-room hotel. It was originally built as a hotel, and then the Church of Scientology leased it, and now it's going to be converted back to a hotel. So a lot of fun and exciting times dealing with the city through that.
This is great. Well, let me go back now to Ellen and Cass and Detty. You've got this charrette coming up. And you did, as Detty said, you did one 3 years ago. And now we've got, sounds like a lot of people who want to participate in this. What's the time frame that you expect to see this happen? And it sounds to me like you've already got a significant number of people who are weighing in, but others may want to weigh in too. So tell us how you plan to manage this, handle it, what's the time frame, and how can others get involved?
Well, so we officially started on Monday. So that was our kickoff of the charrette. We had a preparatory meeting a week prior to the actual start to get everybody up to speed about the maps and the teams that they're on and so on, so that they would hit the ground running this past Monday. We anticipate this running for about 6 weeks. So until mid to late September is what we're shooting for. This is a completely new format for our charrette. Normally we would meet in a high school gym or someplace like that on a Saturday and just, spend 1 or 2 weekends like that, all, working together at big tables with lots of trace paper and pens and coming up with big ideas. But this time we'll be doing it in a virtual format, which is challenging, as you can imagine, but we're figuring it out, and we ask everyone for their patience as we get all the kinks worked out of the system. But so far so good, and we've got, as you mentioned, how more participation than ever, and that might also have something to do with the virtual format, that even people who aren't necessarily here in Santa Barbara physically are able to participate. The demographics of who's participating is also really exciting. So we have a lot of our young emerging professionals on board with what we're doing, and contributing, their enthusiasm for, what can we do to really develop downtown into the sort of vision that Henry so eloquently laid out for us, something much more along the lines of neighborhood and, living above where you work and having little shops that are much more locally based than national chains of any sort. So, the other piece that we're paying a lot of attention to is public open space. So kind of building on the Paseo model in maps and walking guidelines that we have for the community, and factoring that into our thinking as we develop designs for both new construction and for adaptive reuse of existing buildings, also being mindful of the need for the community to, especially now with State Street as a pedestrian thoroughfare, to then be able to filter back into the adjacent blocks and have the opportunity to explore and gain access to buildings that are farther back off of State Street, sort of creating a layered opportunity for people to be part of the energy, of our new and wonderful promenade right through downtown. We're buoyed up by recent developments at the city. For example, the AUD amendments that were just approved a couple weeks ago through the ordinance committee. And now we are allowed to do higher density of multifamily housing. We have parking maximums instead of parking minimums, especially associated with housing, which makes the whole, endeavor something that's achievable, whereas one parking space per unit would be very difficult to achieve in the dense downtown area. So it's an exciting kind of mix of thought process that these teams will apply. There are 12 teams that were each assigned 2 blocks from the 400 block all the way up through the 1000 block. And then we have 4 teams that are looking at the whole corridor of State Street and thinking about what happens at the 2 ends and what's the flavor of the promenade experience that people would have as they circulate along State Street. So really thinking from a landscape level all the way through to architecturally, what kind of vision do we have for our community moving forward? We're really excited. After those 6 weeks of work, we'll pull together the images that we've all developed and present those to the city and to public interest groups and stakeholders. And we're kind of still figuring out who exactly will be demonstrating all of this to, but the idea is that there would be real impact both on the community and on the city's thought process as they're developing new policies for what level of development is the downtown up for. They're looking at FAR numbers, and so we're performing those metrics as well as the aesthetics. So it's beyond pictures, it's also kind of, well, how many square feet of that, are we proposing, and how much of it is commercial, how much of it is housing, how much is public open space. So really quantifying, what we're demonstrating both aesthetically, but also analytically and numerically, so that can give some guidance to the city staff members who are figuring out how do we move from where we are in terms of figuring out a level of development downtown. I'm sure Cass has all sorts of things to add to what I'm saying, so I'll hand it off to her.
Well, and let me just say to all 3 of you who are helping to coordinate this, that these weekly calls that we're doing, or Zoom webinars, we're also broadcasting it live onto YouTube and putting it in a library where people can go click on each week and see what's there. So I would offer to you, as you get through this process and you start to have product or things to look at as you're coming into the mid to late part of this process, we welcome you to come back and take multiple weeks to show this. But we can also do it in a way that we advertise it to every citizen in Santa Barbara, frankly, who has access to YouTube, which is just about anybody. And they can either see your conversation live, or they can click on the website and just play back whichever one piece of it they want. So that's an invitation to you to continue this conversation well beyond today.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
I
appreciate that.
Yeah, I like that idea. We really want that kind of community engagement. We put a lot of attention on that kind of community outreach. Cass?
I think Detty and Ellen have really covered it quite well. I think I can add perhaps a little bit that, of course, this is all about housing. How do we solve our housing crisis, and especially during these times of COVID-19, where we all are very aware and acutely even more aware of the importance of housing as a basic for health and safety. So even though this kind of COVID came upon us when we were in the middle of this, we weren't really thinking about that, but certainly housing is critical for health and safety, as well as for our vitality of our economic vitality of the city. We are struggling to achieve our housing. And so the charrette was for the purpose to bring the skills of the architects and other design professionals to help, to lend their talents to explore and to find these solutions while we respect and enhance and preserve our historic heritage, which is so important in all of this. And I have to say, I really, really appreciate Henry's comments. I think you just hit it nail on the head, that I think so many people come to Santa Barbara because it's not a strip mall, because it is a real city. And we have lost parts of that, as Henry mentioned. And so this is where we can bring it back. So we are working to hear and to include as many people as possible. So we really appreciate this opportunity, Hal, to spread the word, and we're welcoming with open arms everyone in the community. It takes the community to do it. We're all part of the community, so it's essential that we all be involved. And the more that we allow we are the city of amazing, talented artists and of all types. And the more that we allow our community to flower and to show what we do, the more that people will be attracted to Santa Barbara. And that's was our claim to fame in the past, and that is where we are now. So getting the housing downtown where we need it, and having these little stores like Henry described are critical. So as part of the charrette, as DETTY and Ellen have mentioned, it's to study the opportunities to how we can bring housing into the downtown, all different sizes of housing, big and small, all of it is important, and how we blend that with the open yard areas, how we enhance the beautiful promenade, the parks that we see. Hal, your background is a beautiful illustration of that. And how we do this also through adaptive reuse of some of our existing structures. The other part that's so important about this charrette is the illustrations, so that we can the entire community can understand better what exactly it would look like and how it would impact our city in a positive way. So that's a really important aspect of it. And then as Ellen mentioned, the data is critical too, because we want to inform the planning and development what are the best options for us given all of this material. What are the best options moving forward? And that's what we're trying to provide, is a lot of information in that regard, so that we can move forward as we're continuing to develop our development standards. So that's what I would add at this point. Thank you.
Hey, Hal, may I just insert something about housing? I think that's really interesting and important too. It's interesting that in this city, in our city, we kind of excluded housing from our downtown. Why? I don't really know. But I know even when we developed Paseo Nuevo, there were people who had the idea, hey, we should be putting housing on top of these commercial buildings there. Maybe it was too complicated. Maybe some people just didn't think it was a good idea for various reasons. But it's the people that live downtown that are going to give it the life and vitality that's needed over the long term. Just as Henry pointed out, we have seen in European communities and Asian cities all over the world for hundreds of years. Now, what was interesting is when we had the AUD, which was the program that the city came up with to incentivize the development of rental housing and employer-based housing, it was very successful, but for some reason, we left out the downtown area. They left that out of the overlay map because I assume that there were concerns that might be controversial, et cetera. But very fortunately, just in this past couple of weeks, the City Council adopted an amendment to the AUD ordinance, which allows housing now into what was previously referred to as the donut hole. In other words, the donut hole has been filled in so that we can create the incentives needed for people to develop the housing that is going to create the long-term sustainability for our downtown.
Well, one of the things that's parallels that, which I think has been extremely important, and as I've watched this over the last few years, is that yeah, there's no, everybody can talk about the transition from big box retail, brick and mortar stores to online shopping and all the rest of it. But in the transition in Santa Barbara, we have seen, and this is not just unique to Santa Barbara, but we're certainly seeing it here, there are high-tech industries coming into our area, or they're emerging out of the University of California. And those are the next generation of some of the jobs that are here. Whether it's Amazon, which is huge, or LinkedIn and Carpinteria, or Procore, or Snapchat, or any of the other smaller online corporations which are coming in here, those people are looking for housing, but they want housing where they don't have to get into a car and drive to work.
Right.
They want a place where they know they can go out to dinner when they come back home from work, and they can go see a movie, or they can go participate in a play or a lecture, or go to an art gallery, or whatever it may take to be. But it's like the next generation is demanding what people had in the past, which was a way to make this a 24/7 living environment where you can shop, greet, meet, and eat on the street. And so I think that what you're all talking about is a unique, both testament to the past, but a great opportunity to take the next generation and give them a voice in their own future. Because we're seeing what they want, we know what works, and they know what they like. And Santa Barbara has all the elements in its structure to make that happen. There's no doubt that when we did Paseo Nuevo 30 years ago, that two things came out of that. One was that the arts district, which is really pictured behind me, the art museum is sort of the central point of that, and the Granada Theater and the Arlington Theater, and now the Ensemble Theater, and all the art galleries that came in between, and all the restaurants that filled in between all the art galleries, created a cultural district which transformed that part of the city, and really gave a unique stamp of Santa Barbara as a continuing destination of the arts. But Paseo Nuevo itself was built around the arts, between the Contemporary Arts Forum and the Center Stage Theater and the movie theaters that are there, so that the arts became a functional sort of outflow of that whole conversation 30 years ago. Now we're seeing the exact same sort of attractive elements coming back into the conversation all over again. And this is a great opportunity to build a community where people can live, eat, work, and play. And each one of them has a synergistic connection to one another and builds upon one another in a way that really creates a vibrant city, a place where there's vibrancy that is not just known by the people who live here, but vibrancy that is attractive to people who want to come from all over the world to see it.
Right.
There's no question, if you talk to all of the people in the hospitality industry, how many people come to Santa Barbara because they've heard of the culture of Santa Barbara.
Right.
And I think this is our unique point in time where we can bring lots of people together in that conversation. So
one of the really important points you make is an interesting opportunity to talk about the fact that with our multifamily policy that we now have in place called AUD, one of the 3 types of housing that we can create is employer-sponsored housing. And so you were mentioning those various companies those high-tech companies that are moving to our community. I'd like to put it out as a challenge and an opportunity to those employers who are finding it to their advantage to come to Santa Barbara to also participate in creating some of the housing for their employees that we all, jointly desperately need. So I think there's a real opportunity there and to raise awareness that employer-sponsored housing is one of the big opportunities that are built into our current policy.
Yeah, and on to Ellen's point, I know there's a lot of architects and engineers on this call, and if you haven't read the COSMOT report, which the city overpaid, they spent $84,000 on basically information that all the locals have been telling them for many, many years. But it really outlines a lot of kind of what Santa Barbara needs with housing downtown, But the real issue is you have on State Street specifically, you have a whole bunch of small, skinny, buildings that are obsolete as far as they're built in the late 1800s, and how do you reposition them with so many small buildings next to each other? So I think we should really start having a conversation of how do we unify, groups of owners together through a ground lease or some other mechanism so that you can get the economy of scale and to really start jump-starting, housing being done with mixed use downtown. Not to mention the permit process. We have to figure out how to get that streamlined and just give more benefits to the developer, because they take on so much risk for these projects.
Al, I have just a couple of observations in regards to that. Many of us architects currently and in the past have been working on just about every building on State Street, beginning from the beach all the way to Mission Street. It would be very interesting to take inventory of our individual experiences, including yours, Jason, because you've been involved in a lot of these buildings. And just take inventory of what we know, what we have, what we understand about the structural systems, the benefits and the deficits, and most importantly, the potential density for each property. Now, I'll give you an example. Kim and Tammy Hughes, who have been involved, very much involved in the community for many, many years. And he was one of my first clients. And I love Kim because he brought the most impossible projects. And he asked me to see if we can make them happen. And he continues to do that, okay? But it creates a challenge. And I know that quite a few years ago, we were looking at the building where the Angry Shrimp or whatever the restaurant is. And at the time I did a drawing for him in which it comprised about cutting the front portion of the building off, setting a patio and creating a first and second story to that. That building in particular is rather skinny, as you're saying, Jason. However, that would be good enough to put a unit or 2 units. It can be live work space and so on. But if you continue to go down the block of all the possibilities, the properties themselves and the property lines themselves are going to determine the character of the potential solution for that particular building. Now, having said that, probably having the city come up with FARs and things are not going to work. They're just not simply going to work. We have to take property by property, make an analysis, and determine what needs to be done from a health and safety purpose, but also the potential if that particular property warrants a 2-story addition to the 1-story, so much the better. But we do have constraints with that, as you know. I mean, we have to find methods of exiting and so on and so forth. So I would suggest that we, during the charrette, we should also have a component in which we can suggest to the city how to manage and regulate property per property basis, because then it becomes overwhelming. It becomes impossible. And then one of the problems that the city is having in terms of an obstacle is that it's great to create all these regulations when you have a brand new city, but it's not so great when the city is built out, you see. And so in this case, let's not rely on the city to provide us with solution. Let's work with the city and suggest possible solutions of the implementation of the codes and regulations. I should also just mention that if you have a project in San Francisco, regardless of the size of it, and you propose having any kind of parking on site, they'll laugh at you. They'll tell you to go away. And they'll explain to you that they have spent millions and millions of dollars generating public transportation systems in order to make the city, in order to avoid having too much traffic in the city. Well, as you know, all of you, it has worked extremely well. And there's no reason why we couldn't do the same thing here. Now, when it comes to size, bulk, and scale and neighborhood compatibility, there's a simple formula. For instance, let's just take Chapala Street as an example. If there's a building that is going to be torn down and you want to build a 4-story building, fine. But for every story of height, you have to provide a setback of some sort. And if you do that property after property after property, pretty soon you're going to have a park in front of every one of those buildings. It would become a park. You wouldn't see the buildings. All you see is the sycamore trees and you'll see the jacaranda trees. So that's another way of mitigating the deficits of a large structure. And so there are many things that I would suggest should be taken under consideration when we're talking about large or small developments.
And to that point, we also have to be able to attract, did I get lost off the call here?
No, you're there.
We also have to attract, the developers and investors. They simply want a return on their money. Our message right now to the, outside of Santa Barbara, talking to so many investors and developers is we're not business friendly. Why would they do a project here? So I think that, if we can have the scale that's necessary and work towards a short permit process that's, it's something that we can all sell, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, then you're going to start to see a whole new group of people coming that will help us all revitalize. But it's going to take a group effort, and everyone's ideas here is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, and architecturally speaking, the rule is the bigger the building, the simpler it should be. And we have numerous examples of 1920s buildings. And one of them is the telephone building at, what is it, in the corner of Chapala and
Canna Perdito.
Yes, in Canna Perdito. That is a beautiful building. That is a very simple building. So what I'm saying is the argument that you're going to have a large building doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to destroy the character of Santa Barbara or the spirit of the 1920s. And it's just a matter of carving the city the way you want to carve it. The other important tool that we can have is, this day and age, we can build a model of all of State Street from the beach all the way to Mission Street. Now they have the 3D printers and so on. When it comes to analyzing the massing of the buildings, that would be an incredible tool, because I think it would show the harmony, the variations of forms and so on. And it would help the city, it would help us as well to say, look, here's a gap. Here's a donut hole, in other words. Here's where we can put a 3-story building. If the building that currently exists there does not, it needs to be taken down because of the age. Or if a developer comes along and they say, we want to buy 3 parcels of it, then you can analyze the solution to the architecture in a 3-dimensional form that is not only comprehensive to us as architects and designers and decision makers, but also to convince the public that we are carving a wonderful little village. And nowadays it's become economically quite feasible to do that. And it's just a tool.
Well, Henry, to that point, as anybody who works in lots of cities knows, the cities that are successful and go through reimagining and rebuilding who they are, it begins with a creative vision. And the vision takes form in terms of pictures, it takes forms in terms of models, but it also takes form in the form of public meetings where people get to come and actually see it and get to experience, or at least imagine what the experience would be like. You know, I'm reminded over and over again that when the city council was preparing for what became Paseo Nuevo, we went through an election in Santa Barbara, and it was in the November 1983 election, where the voters centrally turned down any major development downtown because they didn't want to lose the Earthling bookstore. And it became a cause célèbre at the time. And everybody kept saying, you need to go down further down State Street, go down to State and De La Guerra Street, build something down there. Well, okay, that's what ended up happening. But it was interesting that as we went through what ultimately became a design competition, which was really sort of the aftermath of what a charrette really is, that in the end, the models that came forward from the 3 finalists who were in that process were put out on State Street. The models were put out, the pictures were put out, the newspapers printed the pictures of them. People were asked to come down and comment on them. They were given 3x5 cards to make their comments on what they saw. And in the end, the council and the Chamber of Commerce and the downtown organization did a survey, a public, essentially a polling, to ask the public what they thought of this new plan. And if they liked the plan, they asked them, did you vote in that election 4 years ago? And if you did, what was your vote? And if they said, well, I voted to stop this development, but I'm now in support of this plan, they asked, well, what changed your mind? And the most common answer always was, that was City Hall's plan, and this is the people's plan. Well, it didn't get defined by the people. It just, the people got to participate in it and began to realize what a fabulous opportunity this was for their future.
I remember
and they began to adopt it and own it. And once they took ownership of it, they liked it because it had all of the elements that they really wanted to see. So whether it was the plans and planning process that Pearl Chase and Bernie Hoffman and Dwight Murphy did back in the early 1920s, whether it was the work that was done by all the arts groups and architects and the redevelopment agency and the city staff in the 1980s, or whether it's the charrette and all of the people who are participating in these kinds of activities today, it's the visioning which grabs the attention, and to which I applaud you for all working to make this happen. And then secondly, the public will be involved and they'll have a say in it, and they'll ultimately adopt it as their own. They'll modify it in one way or another, but this is not, you know, something being shoved down the throat by the city council or the city planners. This is everybody in this together as partners, because in the end, you have to have the property owners as partners. You have to have the leasing agents as partners. You have to have your architects as partners. You have to have the arts groups as partners. And you have to have the city as one of the biggest partners, because they control much of the infrastructure which is around it. And when you create a partnership, that partnership has a nobility to it, which can exceed anything anyone individually imagined. And I think that's where we are today. It's the nobility of that partnership that we're seeking, and why I think this is a great opportunity for us to build the next version of what Santa Barbara can become, and build it with the next generation, not only in mind, but participating in the process.
And that reminds me of a quote that I believe Charles Moore said when we were working on the courthouse. He said, Henry, Santa Barbara reminds me of a place that I have never been to before. It's the romanticism of the image that is so attractive to people. Where have I seen this before? Europe, Mexico? And that one quote, it seems to me, is important to try to preserve, because Santa Barbara is a place to people that have never been here before that reminds them of a place they've never seen before. And that simply states to the character and the personality of Santa Barbara, which is so unique. And other cities like San Clemente and many others have tried to replicate what we have in Santa Barbara. But as you know, it's impossible. It's like my trying to become Rock Hudson. It's not possible. It has a personality. It started with a personality, and it's going to end up, as long as we preserve the personality and the character, that's exactly what we want to achieve, regardless of the solution.
And
So
can I just say, isn't the personality is created by the participation of all of the community?
Yes.
So the more that we have a variety during the charrette, I really urge that everyone is looking at a variety, not just one solution to the housing, but a wide variety of, you know, through the adaptive reuse. What do you do with these long little skinny properties that were mentioned earlier? You know, we want to have variety. We want small, medium, and large, all the different sizes, and to be able to preserve. You know, I love like these little tiny buildings we have, like the press room. You know, it may, whether or not it's a historic landmark, it's a special place, and it's so unique in its little tininess. So, you know, places like that, how do we keep those as part of the fabric as we insert this housing in a way that's sensitive to get large structures as well as small ones, because they all add up, and they all add up to give us the housing that we need, in addition to preserving the historical character and the thing we love so much about Santa Barbara.
And you know, Cass, it's also, it has to do with the diversity of the uses of the buildings. The Macy's buildings, in my opinion, would be a great solution for a boutique hotel. Very few rooms that people will come, they will then stay in Santa Barbara, they will shop in Santa Barbara, they will eat in Santa Barbara. And as you probably all know, the great trend in Europe now is the micro boutique hotels. Some hotels only have 4 suites. And ironically, they're making more profit than a 150-room hotel because their overhead is so low. Interesting. Just food for thought.
Well, it's interesting too, Henry, that because we've had the folks from Paseo Nuevo on in weeks before, and they were in a conversation that I was in just yesterday, and you know, although they're taking ownership of the Macy's building, they're also looking at taking ownership of the Nordstrom building if it becomes available from the Nordstrom Corporation. And I asked them, well, what would be your primary thing that you'd want to see there? And they said, well, either housing or a hotel. So it's like, you know, everybody's moving in the same wavelength. Well, as we're getting to the end of the hour here, because I know you need to go on to another call, but let me just ask Cass and Detty and Ellen, if people are watching and they want to be involved or they want to know more about the charrette, is there a place they can go to and either sign up or see what's available? Is there a website they could go to, or how could they let you know they're interested?
I think the easiest thing to do is to go to the AIA SB website. That's AIA, American Institute of Architects, Santa Barbara website. There's just a lot of information about the charrette is there. There are different links that they can click on to get more information and potentially sign up in some capacity, etc.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you all for being available today. It just strikes me listening to the conversation how the great traumatic and exciting changes that occurred in the 1920s were really built around El Paseo. And the great changes and exciting changes that occurred in the 1980s and 90s were built the new Paseo Nuevo. And today we're looking at the new promenade, or the new Paseo. It really is, it seems to be the sort of core of what happened in all 3 generations of the transformation here in the last 100 years of State Street. Were built around El Paseo, Paseo Nuevo, or the new promenade, State Street. So
Interesting.
the unique image that has transformed itself over 100 years in the middle of Santa Barbara, and everything else that's built around it, the businesses, the arts, the livelihood, the housing, the sense of culture, and the sense of excitement. And as Simon Eisner, the former long time ago urban planner in Santa Barbara, said, Santa Barbara's more than a place, it's a state of mind. We're a part of that state of mind. So thank you all for being a part of this today, and thank you all who are watching. And I encourage all of you to participate in this charrette process, this design process, and look forward to you being back with us in the next few weeks as you start to go through this process and share with the community. And we'll help expand it to beyond just who's on this call, but really over YouTube to every home in Santa Barbara so that people can see what it is that you're doing. And I want to thank you all for being here today and all those who are watching for being a part of the background conversation.
Thank you, Hal.
Thank you,
Thank
Hal,
you.
for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Hal.
So on our website, Santa Barbara Leadership Team, the links to these videos of all of these sessions are there and will be there in the coming weeks. So thank you all for participating today.
Thank you, Hal.
And
See you in the next session.
good afternoon.
Thank you.